Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm happy to welcome you all and welcome you all to HFC's second webinar focusing on the role of academic experts for sustainable grant making. HFC's unique model focuses on volunteers from the alternative investment industry fundraising on HFC's behalf on one hand, and then awarding the funds raised by those grants to local community organizations with programs that focus on child abuse prevention and treatment with the support of our academic experts. I'll start off by introducing the two academic experts who are partaking in today's discussion. We have Dr. Ovida Williams, who is our academic expert for the New York branch. Dr. Williams is the executive director of Columbia's School of Social Work's Action Lab for Social Justice. She has taught the social work practice and domestic violence course at Columbia and the Social Work Practice Lab for Liberation and Social Justice at Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College. She is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in intimate partner violence and forensic social work practice with 10 years of experience as the Director of Clinical Services and the Counseling Services Unit at the Kings County District Attorney's Office. Thank you, Ovida, for joining. And then we have Dr. Tina Zipnicki. She is our academic expert at the HFC's Chicago branch. Dr. Zipnicki is the David and Mary Winton Green Professor Emerita at the School of Social Service Administration, which is now the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Her areas of special interest include case decision-making, task-centered and behavioral practice, and practice research, particularly in the field of child welfare. Currently, she is the principal investigator of the multi-year program practices investigation project at Office of the Inspector General, Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Thank you, Tina and Ovida, again for giving your time to our webinar today. So I'll start off by asking both of you to talk about how long you have been involved with HFC and what drove you to becoming an academic expert for HFC.
Who do you want to start?
Go ahead, Tina.
Well, I've been the academic partner for 17 years, I believe, shortly after the Chicago office opened up. And the reason I got involved was that I was teaching practice and research courses in our graduate program, and was also supervising students in the field, but I really felt like I wanted to have a more direct connection to the field than I was able to have, and perhaps have more direct impact than what scholarship usually provides through publications. I wanted to do something a little more active and see more immediate results and changes in behavior, improvements in the way that organizations sort of thinking about practice, and be able to help them figure out better ways, perhaps, of measuring both the processes they engage in and the outcomes, as that has all become so much more important in service provision in these years. And I really feel very strongly that evidence-based or empirically based practice was something that could be not just introduced, but help programs develop further expertise in, and I wanted to be a part of that. I also am really interested in innovative practices and ways of determining whether they're effective or not. And HFC provides opportunities for programs to introduce, or for agencies to introduce programs that are innovative and get them funded at least a pilot level. And to me, that was very exciting and was something that I thought the field would really benefit from.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you for that, Tina. I don't think I knew all of that. So I think I've been involved for about 15 years with Help for Children, and I was trying to remember the dates, but for a while, and I have to say that I didn't have any idea about what I would be getting into, honestly. I had been a clinician, a therapist. I was doing micro level work, direct practice, field education department at Columbia University, so planning internships with students. And this opportunity came to me actually by, your predecessor, Samuda, a few executive directors previously who approached me and said, would you consider this? And I really didn't have any idea about philanthropy work as a social worker. I didn't have any idea about, what it would take to work as a grants maker and to be in that role. But over these 15 years, I say this all the time, I have learned as a social worker exponentially what the world of grant making is, from proposal to evaluations, supporting organizations, the world of philanthropy. And I tell my students now, I said, if you're still thinking about where you want to be, think about philanthropy. That's where social workers need to be. That's where our voices need to be. So it's been incredibly rewarding for me to be able to be on like the other side. Right. So when I was working in child welfare, I was a person asking for money. I'm now in a position as academic consultant working with people who are raising funds to be able to support those very organizations, families, and staff who are doing the day-to-day work. So to be able to see that view has added so much to who I am as a social worker, and the way that I can use my power right now and my stature right now with HSC to be able to make a difference on a macro way, and where and really decide, like, where does the money go, and to be able to be conscientious and really really think through the most equitable and way that we can think about doing that. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Avita. As you're talking, I'm also thinking about many ways that you have been a part of my life as well, because I first was introduced to you as a student at Columbia School of Social Work, and then now here we are making the macro level changes that are much needed. And I've had the opportunity to learn from you from the beginning, and now we're looking as colleagues, and that's a really great experience. And it speaks to how social workers are really could be in every space that's needed to make meaningful social change.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm
Awesome.
excited too.
Yeah, definitely. So throughout the webinar, we're gonna go from the grant application process to the selection process, and then the program implementation and the evaluation, and what the academic expert involvement throughout that process looks like. So to start off with the grant application process, can you to talk a little bit about what it looks like for you to be an academic expert when there are organizations that are interested in applying for a grant at HFC? So from the very beginning, how do you get involved, and how do you kind of steer that process from your level?
And that's what I love about Help for Children and utilizing the academic consultant model, is that most foundations don't have experts, right? And so maybe distributing funding and money and not have the scope of understanding of what the world of child abuse prevention, work looks like, what organizations and not-for-profits are dealing with. So for, folks like Tina and I to be able to sit at the table with folks and be able to share that with hedge funds folks and folks who are in a completely different field. When it comes to organizations, my role has always been from the very beginning to answer agencies' really concrete questions, right? Like, does the mission of the organization fit Help for Children's mission? To walk people through the kinds of ideas they have about projects and programs that they're interested in seeking funding for. How realistic are your numbers? What are your evaluation tools? What's your current program right now? Where are the gaps? What does the literature say about the particular intervention or work that you want to do? So from the very beginning, we're helping people even before they submit the LOI to think through, is this a foundation that would support the work? Is it aligned that would be able to support the kind of interventions and programs that you want to develop? So I talk to folks about, what's your current staffing? Do you have any, what's your current line of funding? If you were to think about a logic model and go through, the kinds of things that you would input into this project and what the outcomes are that you're seeking, how would you approach that? And helping folks to think about a stronger LOI and hopefully proposal that would, and folks often want to know what kind of programs has Help for Children funded in the past, and how would we be competing with other programs and other types, and often I get the question, what's Help for Children really interested in these days? Like, what does the foundation want to really fund? And so they can think about how they might align with the mission and the goals of Help for Children.
Yeah, I think I would agree with everything you just said, Avita. Plus, I would add to that I think we help generate a pool of agencies or organizations that are likely to be eligible for submitting LOIs and grants. So even before the step that you just described, we try to come up with a reasonable list of people based on my own past experience. Over the many years I've been in Chicago, trying to generate kind of a broad array of organizations that have different interests and different kinds of programs and strategies. And some of them are more direct practice oriented or service delivery oriented. Some of them are much more policy development. Some of them are research organizations, to generate a diverse portfolio in that way, as well as other ways geographically and other demographics. So yeah, that's, I think, an additional part of the application process.
Right, definitely. And can you also talk a little bit about how you seek out evidence-based practices or programs that have the evidence-based piece in it, and how that is important, and how you look for that when you seek out some of these programs, even before the grant application process? Can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, so, I think in this day and age, it's a little trickier than it sounds, I think, because in this day and age, I think most programs, most organizations advertise themselves as being evidence-based, right? And so if you're not really familiar with the work that they do at a more, than superficial level, sometimes it's really hard to know if that's just the jargon that they've grabbed onto, or if it really is meaningful. So I think that's kind of a tough one in a way, but I would also say that most agencies strive to be evidence-based in one way or another. And I think of evidence-based as perhaps more broadly than some other people might. I don't think of it only as organizations that deliver services using a manualized intervention or an intervention that has been published to be effective with particular populations. But I think of evidence-based as also being a process that is, and this goes back to this notion of innovation, which is we look for organizations that are developing their own approaches that fit, that are tailored to their population and client population and issues that they address, and are thinking seriously about how they might measure both what's going into the services as well as what's coming out in terms of outcomes. And I think of that very much as evidence-based as well. So it's a pretty broad definition.
I totally agree. And I would say that it's looking for maybe organizations that are evidence informed
Yeah.
or evidence aligned, right? More than, strictly grounded in some kind of literature that says this is the way to do this. Is that folks have taken some kind of cursory look at the literature, right? Like what's out there, what are tools, what are curriculums that people are using, and then really be able to talk, well, how might that fit with the kind of program that you're looking at developing? So as Tina's saying, it's more of that there is a level of some kind of research that folks have done to see what is applicable, and if it is applicable for not just for the heck of it, obviously, but that it's applicable to the population served, the mission of their organization, and the way in which that program might be developed. And we're totally open to hearing that out. I think it is definitely, if there's a proposal that we're just thinking of doing it this way, right? We're like, okay, could you back that up a little bit more?
Yeah.
So it's like there's a spectrum, if you will, right? From evidence-based to absolutely zero thought. That in there is where we can work with folks and really bring them as close as possible to what is being said about this topic, this issue, the population served, the kinds of elements needed to develop something that's robust and has a lot of quality to it, and the outcomes desired.
Yeah. Thank you for that, for expanding on that. All right, so now that we know a little bit about grant application and what the academic experts do before the grant application process and during, we can move on to the grant selection process. So can you talk a little bit about what your role is in the process of grant selection? We have a large number of LOIs that come in year after year. It far exceeds the grant amounts available for us to give out oftentimes. So we have really tough decisions to make. And you both have led the grant committees in making those tough decisions. And I would like for you to talk a little bit about what that feels like, how you, what that process looks like for you both.
So I would say that you mentioned the LOIs, that we receive these letters of intent from organizations that are interested in receiving funding. And in addition to that, we also have current grantees who would like to be funded yet again, because we only provide funding on a year-to-year basis. And so I think an important role besides reviewing LOIs, because we get so many LOIs, generally what we do is sit down before the committee ever meets and kind of comb through them and see which ones we would like to invite to write full proposals for. And then with the current grantees, what's one of the things that's really important is because they can go ahead and submit a proposal without an LOI, is to report back to the committee on our part, a report back to the committee on the current performance and the kinds of challenges that perhaps that they face and the kind of problem solving they've done around those challenges to adjust their programming so that it is likely to be successful or more successful. And so that's a really important part of the review process in the grant committee, but in reviewing proposals themselves, which actually comes before that. At least in Chicago, I'm not sure. I think the different sites may handle this a little bit differently. I could be wrong about that. But in Chicago, we try to limit the number of proposals for the committee to,
Yeah,
well,
same thing.
we try to limit it so that it's not overwhelming for people to review. And then we meet as a committee to review those. And so those come from both new applicants as well as current grantees. So we have different kinds of information we can provide the committee on the basis of those proposals, based on our own experiences with those organizations, whether that be formally through our role in the current year or previous years with the organization, or just because of our experience otherwise with the organizations.
Yeah, are you finished, Tina? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
I
was just gonna add one more thing about one of the things that we look for in proposals is, again, I go back to this notion of innovation and new programming, and I try to highlight for the committee to what extent these innovations may or may not make sense, given what I know about the literature and given what they've stated in their proposals. And then, yeah, so that, I think that's sort of the main thing when it comes to innovations and pilot programs. We like to fund research from time to time, although years back it was a bit of a hard sell for the committee that generally wants to fund programs that are going to have immediate benefits for clients. But I think we've worked pretty hard to try to incorporate research projects when we can, understanding that they provide benefit in a broader way in terms of leading to perhaps ongoing funding for the development of new programs and projects, perhaps through federal funding or something that this pilot study may contribute to, or through publication. They contribute to the field more broadly. And so it's not just a matter of having impact on clients immediately, but thinking about the kinds of projects that might have longer term impact, and slightly different from the way most funders think about it.
Yeah. I appreciate this webinar because it's demystifying the whole grant making process for organizations that might be listening in. And it's actually the actual selection process is, for me, the most fun part, because we get to see in New York, you know, we might get like 80, maybe 80 LOIs, and then as social workers, Samudu, myself, other folks, students, right, we'll read through, and then we're looking for intent. We're looking for something that is sturdy, that is strong, that is agencies that we might know of, because I was in the field department at Columbia for so long. I knew a lot of the agencies, so I had a sense of what those agencies were and what they do. So we would take these 80 LOIs, dwindle them down to some core organizations that have strong budgets, strong proposal around what it is the intention is of the, and then invite them back for to write a proposal. And then from that, maybe felt like it was like 30 or so proposals. now, that were really strong. And then as social workers, we would review those 30. And then, as you said, Tina, give the committee a percentage of that, usually 12 to 15. So we've looked over and really, spent some time to really think about what would be the way to, one, initiate the grants committee and to show the grants committee what's out there, and where funding, like HFC's funding, can really have the most impact. In New York, we have, I think we're funding for 7 years at a time, but yearly, up to 7 years. Before, I would say probably about 8 years ago, it wasn't a deadline, if you will. So folks would, but I think now that we're able to, we have more of a time limit, so to speak, we can look at a variety of organizations. And I think that's what I love about HFC is that, I think Tina, you alluded to this, is that the innovation part, the creativity, the helping folks to pilot something that other funders might not, is really pretty cool, actually. And for us during the selection process as academic consultants to help the grants committee understand the scope of child welfare, the scope of the kinds of interventions, the way in which the landscape is shifting and changing. So we actually do presentations at the grants committee meetings, to help folks who are not in the field understand what the field looks like, what people are facing. During COVID, the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, as we all know, many agencies might have had to close their doors for a few days. And then when getting back online, literally we're online and we're telehealthing. And so to support the committee in understanding this is the reality, this is the on the ground, what things are looking like, and the kind of funding HFC can rally around to support organizations, will support an organization in this way. So I feel like at that selection process, as academic consultants, we have an opportunity to educate. Right. And we have an opportunity to show the on the ground, day-to-day realities of people's lives and organizations responding to crisis, responding to the needs of communities that they serve.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Aveda. I think you pointed to an important part where, for someone looking at just the numbers, oh, you get 80 LOIs, and then the committee only looks at 14, 15, but it's a rigorous process that involves multiple processes, I guess, where multiple people look at these portfolios multiple times to make sure that we get the best of the best and the strongest programs supporting them. But that doesn't mean that we, look away after we have the chosen few. All right. I think the other part of this, and if you both can add to this, is also the declinations. We don't just let the declined organizations, just sit and mope, so to say. We support them. You both take time to talk to them and let them know how to make their applications stronger for next time. And they reach out to you. Can you talk a little bit about that process as well?
Yeah, and I actually want to add that from the 80 to the 15, right, that there are organizations that we might toggle over a bit and want to give an opportunity, want to give a chance. Yeah. That the proposal might not have been, 100% immaculate, but that's not what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. We're looking for passion. We're looking for like commitment. We're looking for how are you trying to prevent and solve the problem around child abuse and neglect. Like what does that look like? And some smaller organizations who might not have a full development team or a research lab or a staff of 100, that program might be the exact program HFC needs to fund, right? And so we will give an opportunity to move that organization along. Why not, right? Especially if they're, showing commitment and drive and maybe have had contact with us in some way, shape, or form. And I think the same with the declinations is being able to talk to people about the proposal, the way that it might have been written, the logic model, the budget might have seemed a little bit off, but to give feedback. And people are so, more than anything, people aren't disappointed. They're like, thank you, thank you. And what can we do next time? What can we do next time? And that kind of engagement, you remember organizations next time. The next time the proposal comes in and it looks way even better, that might be an opportunity that year. There was one organization, I always share this information. They had been applying for years and it kind of didn't fit HFC for a bit. And finally, we said, yes, we will move. So now we've been funding them for about 4 years. And I think the biggest issue was that at the time, HFC, Help for Children, was unclear about what workforce development meant to child abuse prevention. And so finally, kind of back and forth with the committee, trying to help the committee understand, plus helping the agency each time that they were declined, to say, all right, let's go to that literature. Let's go to see how you can make that connection between improving the workforce and child welfare, which we all know it's hard. It's a hard job. It is tough. One of the toughest to work on child abuse and trauma every single day, right? So how do you improve that? Supervision, seminars, workshops, in order to then have families experience continuity in services, in resources, in employees and counselors and social workers there to support them. And so it finally clicked at the particular time. And it, so we'll do that. We'll do a lot of that kind of one-on-one.
And sometimes it's just a matter of helping an organization use language that makes sense to the financial industry folks. Because sometimes it's as much language issue or the way the proposal is written as it is the content, or more so than the content. And so, one of the things that I love about working with HFC is the fact that they're really bottom line people. They want to know that the money that is being spent on these programs is going to good use. And so helping organizations keep that in mind also while they're writing their proposals and presenting their ideas in a way that really highlights that this is going to be, an efficient use of the funds because of X, Y, and Z, for example.
Right, yeah. And I think what's really good about this connection, with whether it's with the declinations or with the selection process, it's very collaborative, right? I think that's what community building looks like for us at HFC and with our grantees. That's the community building part that we try to cultivate, where we try to constantly support some of these programs, even when they're not being chosen. We try to give them as much support as we can through the academic expert. And I think that's something that we value, really. Speaking of which, I think when we go into, once the awards are given, we don't just give the awards and look the other way. Something that the academic experts also do is really pay attention to the program implementation. And you both throughout the year really stay connected to the grantees and make sure that you mentor the grantees in a way to make sure that the program implementation is executed from beginning to end throughout that grant year. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also add in your answers to maybe an example of when grantees were not able to meet some of the goals and how you help them navigate through that issue?
You know, I think we start from the very beginning, at least in Chicago. And again, I think sites vary a little bit in how they do this, but I mean, we are all available to the grantees throughout the year, but some of us, at least, and I know certainly in Chicago, we have what I call a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the grant year, where we bring everybody together. Now, COVID did put a bit of a challenge there for us, but in other years, we've been able to get together in person and spend half a day together, not only going over things like reporting requirements and stuff like that, but also perhaps at least as importantly, is to go over the proposals using the logic models that are part of the proposal as kind of a foundation for discussion, so that they can engage in peer-to-peer consultation to improve, because the proposals are not perfect usually. And so this allows them to work together to improve their ideas about their ideas about how to describe the interventions that they're planning and the outcomes, and also select perhaps measurement tools if the ones that they have chosen to use to measure outcomes don't seem to be particularly robust. But again, although I'm there to consult with them, what I do is I break them up into groups and have them do peer-to-peer consultation, and they are enormously helpful to each other. It also provides an opportunity for them to establish new partnerships that they wouldn't have thought of before, and that has also led to additional innovation on their parts. We don't have anything to do with funding, because that's not what we're funding, but it provides them with colleagues that they didn't know that they had very often. The grantees have said to me often that they would like to have more of these meetings throughout the year, although I suspect that if we tried to do it more than once a year, they wouldn't think it was such a great idea, perhaps. But it does suggest that they value the meeting and benefit a great deal. And oftentimes I will get revised versions of their logic models and new ideas for how they might measure their outcomes and their processes as well. So it's been really a nice way to introduce them to each other, as well as introduce them to HFC more generally, because they don't come from the same child welfare groups or professional organizations necessarily. They come from a variety of organizations that serve children and families where child abuse and neglect might become an issue, perhaps. And so it's really a great way for them to establish collegial relationships with each other. So that's one way. That's the way we start off the year. And then, of course, I try to be available to them throughout the year by checking in on a regular basis to see how they're doing. They provide us with interim reports so that on a regular schedule, so we know how they're doing. And if there are issues that they face that they're struggling with, they are encouraged to contact us. If there is a change in the organizational structure, staffing, or ability to implement a program that has budget implications in particular, they're required to contact us so that we can help them troubleshoot if necessary. We also do annual site visits. Again, that was made difficult during a couple of years of COVID. So we, in Chicago anyway, did those by Zoom. But in other years, I've always visited them at least once a year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even going to add, Tina said it all. Maybe I'll answer the second part about when if there are situations where folks might not have been able to implement a program. And absolutely, definitely that has happened. And so what we'll do, that's why the site visiting and the preliminary reports and the phone calls initially is really important. The funding is a year, and a year goes very quickly, and things happen. We see that in the last 3 years, things happen, right? And so people have to readjust. So that's what we'll step in and do. One example I think that comes up a lot, especially when it is a new program, because we're funding pilot programs a lot of the times, it takes some time to recruit,
Yes.
right? It takes some time. So, getting a recruitment strategy together, hiring someone takes a minute. Maybe there's a particular language or something unique about the person that you need to hire for this program. Those things take a while. So then in that year, the year goes by very quickly. So we might regroup. Let's look at the budget. Do we want to shift things around? Maybe you thought you would be able to attend some conferences, but that's not happening with the funding. So let's shift it somewhere. So we'll do that. I mean, I honestly, transparently can only think of one time when we were like, send the check back, but that was
Right.
that was really, but most of the time it's let's rework some things here,
Right.
and move some things around.
Yeah, again, that speaks to how collaborative we are, how collaborative this process is, and how we kind of help each other out, right? And I think grantees oftentimes really appreciate having that support from HFC and from the academic consultants. They often come back and say that they really appreciate us having that understanding, because most funders don't do that. And I think that's what also sets us apart from other funders, because we try to understand where they're coming from, and we understand that these programs are a necessity to the communities that they support. Yeah. All right. So my next question is about program evaluation. You answered this in some of the questions that you answered so far. Can you talk a little bit about areas of evaluation that you assist grantees with, and what that looks like when it comes to implemented programs, and what that support really looks like for folks who don't understand some of these programs that we support?
Okay. I mean, it's often been looking at something like developing a pre and post test, for example, like really concrete ways that folks can evaluate, especially if, again, they don't have like a large evaluation team. It may be just going through implementing some kind of pre-post test. What surveys and tools might be out there if you're looking at how your program is addressing communication between parent and child? There are tools out there to do that, and sometimes it's just pointing people in the direction to access those tools, maybe developing surveys, thinking through their methodology. So yeah, I think in those ways, and what's helpful, because like, if I know another program is using something that's really been successful, then I will say to, another program, hey, how about this? Do you think this is something that might be useful in evaluating the work that you're doing?
Right. So that's when our peer-to-peer consultation is really useful at the outset, but that does not necessarily solve the problems throughout the year. It gets people started, and I will bring resources with me to the meeting to help people think about appropriate measurement strategies. But throughout the year, you may find, like when we look at our interim reports, that they're not able to get the information or the data that they had hoped to for one reason or another. And so it might require some sort of adjustment in measurement strategies, sort of midterm, so that by the end of the year, at least there'll be some data hopefully valid and reliable data, that would allow them and us to draw some conclusions about the efficacy of the program.
Mhm.
So it's an ongoing, for some programs, it's an ongoing issue because they want to develop their own instruments because there's nothing out there that speaks to their clientele, or their intervention doesn't fit for some reason or other. And so for some programs, it's a bit of a struggle, and we're there to kind of help them through it as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. I have to admit, I don't know about you, Tina, but sometimes reading through the reports, it's hard to tease out
Mhm.
really what the actual,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's like there's numbers, things that might not add up. So then it's a phone call. Like, I'm not sure I understand how this
They need to
connects
learn
with
how to
that.
They need to learn
Yeah.
how to make it accessible, right?
Yeah.
Accessible, understandable to
Yeah.
us and to other
Yeah.
people who might be looking at the report. So
Right.
sometimes that's
Right.
part of the challenge. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it helps that you both have years of expertise, and also years of expertise with different programs and different methods of evaluation, so that you can kind of share best practices with grantees so that they can, maybe it wasn't available to them, but through you now it's available,
Right.
because you are now involved. And I think that really helps them to have that expertise, to have that connection be available to them. Yeah, that's great. And one of the hard parts, I think, of the academic expert role is the responsibility that you have in giving grant renewal recommendations. We, look at the current grantees and also new grantees, new proposals that come in. Can you talk a little bit about how you support the organizations that you do not recommend for grant renewal? And also, I mean, you already talked about how you support the grantees that are current. So the other side of it, how do you support grantees that are not given awards? And how do you encourage them so that they kind of come back, fix whatever they need to fix in their proposal and come back and continue with their programs while they're working on coming back to HFC?
Yeah.
Look, it's hard to say no.
Yeah.
It is so hard to say no. Myself and folks in the grants committee have, like, every year that we're going out to site visits, it's always a few people saying, how are we supposed to say no to these incredibly great programs? So it's so hard that maybe you've been funding someone for several years and now they've reached that 7th year, and it's like, all right, now either think about how you want to expand, think about what other parts of your organization you might want to look at developing a good program around. Maybe you've put it on the back burner. Maybe we can revisit that. But yeah, I think it's really providing folks with information, looking at the proposal again, what's missing, what can be stronger.
Sometimes,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I think that was it. Yeah, I was thinking, yeah.
Now I forgot what I was going to say. So I think that one of the things that happens, we don't in Chicago, we don't fund programs, or we haven't anyway, for more than 5 years. And I try to make a point when I'm interacting with the organizations to let them know throughout the year that continued funding is not guaranteed, and that they're in the next funding cycle. I mean, I don't know that they always hear this, but the next funding cycle, their proposal is going to be put in a pool with a bunch of other proposals, and they're going to be looked at all over again. And in some ways, I don't say this part generally, but in some ways they could be at a disadvantage because we have a track record with them, or they have a track record with us. And if it's not a perfect track record, then some members of the committee might think that this program may not be worthy of being funded again. in general, we don't view things that way because we understand that almost all program implementation runs into challenges throughout the year, no matter what. And that what's more important than whether they've been extremely successful is whether they've been able to problem solve around those challenges. And so that's what we really focus on.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they don't get refunded because they haven't done a very good job of that.
Right.
The program wasn't particularly successful, and they have not really carefully analyzed what went wrong and tried to troubleshoot it.
Right.
That's a problem, you know? And so, you know, I might talk with them
Yeah.
about that so that in the future, when they come back for funding, obviously they're strong programs because they wouldn't have been funded in the first place. And so I try
Right.
to reinforce that notion.
Right.
But when they come back, they need to think about these things more carefully and understand that when we read the reports, the interim reports and the final reports, that we read them carefully. I've, on rare occasion, but it has happened where a program provided data showing that they were not successful in what they were doing. And then in the conclusion of the report talks about how successful they are. Like I wasn't looking at the middle of the report or something, you know, that doesn't happen often. But, you know, I think sometimes they're not, even with us, even with the ongoing contact with us, they're not always clear on how carefully we pay attention to things.
Mhm.
And so I try to
Mhm.
remain supportive, but, you know, part of that support is for them to come back to us when they need to get ongoing help throughout the grant.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't sugarcoat that
No.
you maybe didn't reach your project goals. Don't
Right.
sugarcoat that,
Right.
you know, something else came, you know, really be very, very honest. And then we could start from there, you know, whatever that is. And that has been some of the most fruitful interactions is, look, we're really struggling. We're not sure how to address this. Can we talk through this? And then move something around, switch something around, whatever it is. But be transparent. Don't sort of make it seem like it's something else.
Right.
That directness will be what the grants committee, what as academic consultants, we value. We value that kind of upfront discussion and engaging us in how we could be supportive.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hearing from all of this that we really look at the quality of the programs and we value the quality of the programs. And I think that is a perfect segue to our wrap-up question, where what this webinar is about sustainability, why we value sustainability. And throughout our grant process, how do we support both grantees maintain quality programs, and we spoke about why we value quality programs, and if you can speak to how you support HFC in ensuring sustainability as an academic expert, and give maybe one example each. I'm mindful of time, and I want to make sure that we have at least time for one question. So if you can kind of wrap us up with that question or that answer, I would really appreciate that.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, people want to be funded ongoing. We know that the pot of money for not-for-profits, like everyone's going after the same pot of money. We understand that. So sustainability, I mean, I think the 7-year is good because we can start from, you know, each year we're building, each year we're talking about, well, how else are you thinking about this program? Where's funding? How are you leveraging HFC funding in order to be able to look for other funding? So that's very, in a nutshell, I think, part of it.
Right. So that I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And also, I think that something that I mentioned earlier about the pilot studies sometimes serve as the foundation for something bigger, right? And so we try to help them think about how to scale up. And also, in terms of research projects, which we've had a few of that were rather small scale, it provided some pilot data for to contribute to a bigger grant proposal that might be going to the federal government for a larger study that's likely to lead to bigger changes more broadly, not just in that little local area, but through publication, for example, through conference presentations, building knowledge for the field, which is another type of sustainability, right? We've had some projects that focus on the development of a policy arm of the organization, and with a purpose of contributing to national policy on the topic. So, I mean, I think about this in terms, particularly most recently with our organization that provides volunteer advocates for undocumented immigrant children. And they have developed this whole other branch to their organization that has done some magnificent work at the federal level already. So that kind of stuff I think is really important as well. And it isn't exactly the way we think about sustainability of a particular program at a local level, but it's sustainability nevertheless.
Yeah, just very quickly, there was a hospital that started a small little program. And then when they started to do training throughout the hospital, then the hospital said, we like your program, we're going to fund it. We're going to, so starting in that way and growing from there and spreading out to the rest of the organization, what you're doing could lead to funding from the board and other avenues. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, both of you. I think I learned a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the process as well. And I want to open up the floor for any questions from our participants. Yes.
Hi, Elizabeth. I just want to give a shout out to Tina for another way that we've created sustainability on a national level. One of our very earliest grants was to Lurie Children's Hospital in collaboration with Research Triangle. And they created a checklist for babies that were coming to the ER that had non-organic failure to thrive. And I had never heard of this phrase. And it basically means that the mother's starving the child, probably accidentally, because she really doesn't understand how to properly feed a growing baby. And the checklist that they created was so robust that it's now being used in every children's hospital in the United States. So there are ways that we can really leverage our effectiveness.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for reminding us of that program and what that impact looks like on a larger scale. So it might look like some of these dollars are small, but the impact is definitely larger than we can imagine. And over the years, as we support, I know we kind of focus on the 1-year grant and then the 7-year cap, but I think overall impact has been huge. It can't just be measured by the amount of dollars that we have given out. The impact is much larger than the number of dollars, really. So I am mindful of time. I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. It will be available online on our new website for you all to watch. So please watch it and share it. We will share it in our newsletter as well, so you'll be able to share it with colleagues. We are going to have another webinar in the fall again. So if you can join that, tell folks about it, tell folks who are interested in joining HFC and volunteering for HFC. I think we would really benefit from that. And I want to take a moment to thank Tina and Ovita for helping us, not just with this webinar, but throughout the year for 15, 17 plus years, for making a true difference in our communities. You both are my heroes.
Thank you.
Mine too.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tina.
you.
Thank you, Avita.
Thank you for
Thank you.
organizing this. This is
Of
Yeah,
wonderful.
it was really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, take
Thank-
care. Bye, everyone.